What are the three most critical staffing investments that healthcare executives can make these days?
We hear a lot about staffing shortages in healthcare, but what if the real issue is a breakdown in trust, flexibility, and frontline alignment? Today, I'm joined by Shana Althouse and Allie Contreras, former ER social workers turned staffing executives who have built a model that measurably improves retention and reduces burnout by treating relationship quality as a core operational asset. We'll talk shift customization, culture diagnostics, and the overlooked ROI of strategic empathy in workforce planning. I'm Christina. This is Outcomes.
So, what are the three most critical staffing investments that healthcare executives can make these days?
That's a good question. I think you have to investing in the relationship. I think now more than ever, our healthcare professionals, as you know, the amount of assaults that are happening in not just in the emergency rooms, but throughout in nursing long-term care. I think that that's a huge investment they can make is really valuing those relationships they have with their staff and providing that a higher level of support. I think that we actually were talking about this earlier in our team meeting. Shift we're kind of seeing in mostly we work with nurses and CNAs is they're looking for certain shifts because that works around their life. They almost are valuing that more necessarily than what they get paid. They want that balance. They want that work-life balance. And so you may have someone who's want weekends only because they've got kids school age and they want to go to all of those activities. Then you've got maybe younger nurses and they really value their weekends. But I think that's two. And then three is I think the biggest and third investment is listen to what your staff is saying. Do they need? Do they need regular basis? And I think just listening goes a long ways. I've seen leadership that does really well with that. They can't always meet everything that people are asking. But if you feel heard, that goes a long way. They're your experts. They're the ones doing the job.
When you just spoke right now about flexibility in work schedules and even that taking precedence over compensation. That's amazing. That's a really amazing insight. Actually, I came across like this article some time ago that said something to the effect of like in healthcare specifically for I believe it was like for working moms, the desire for that life balance and those sort of like flexible arrangements and that kind of thing. It's so important to them that they'd actually that they be willing to take like less in pay or fewer benefits to make up for it. So essentially, that workers want this so bad that they're willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to age myself right now, but my son is 24, my daughter is 22, and I've said this all the time. My career has kind of ebbed and flowed around their schedule. Sometimes what my kids needed was more me time. I worked less, and then sometimes, with depending on the activities they were in, needed more money. So it was a balancing act, and I see that. It's interesting having gone through that. Now I see it. Very close friends of mine who are nurses and now moms, and they're running all over, activities, and it's some of them, they've dropped down to part time because that's what they need for themselves, their family, and so we are seeing more of that, and we're getting very specific. Like this is what I'm looking for.
We just had a meeting about that, talking about the more seasoned nurses. We'll say that they don't mind working the weekends, while as the younger generation, they want to have their weekends off, and so they want their schedule. And yes, they are willing to give up certain compensation for that.
So,
I definitely feel like at my age, I definitely look at that as well. I mean, that's why I chose to work in an emergency room, was because I had the 312s options. I didn't care if it was night or days. And I think Shana as well.
Absolutely.
so do you see any kind of connection between that well-being or like sense of like feeling supported holistically and outcome, like clinical outcomes?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I can speak personally to that. I think that always helps. We were, KU is a 90-some bed emergency room, I think. And we also were told that, I don't know the hospitals you're in, like the hospital we were in on to the behavioral emergency response team. And that was throughout the entire hospital. It developed that, which I think is great. I think it was BS, the DSOs of the hospital and security would all respond together. I think that there would be mornings by 7 a.m. I'm driving home, my eyes are barely open because the volume was increasing so much. We were seeing so much more need for true psychiatric assessments. And when you are assessing suicidality or homicidality, if you're burnt out, if you're not top of your game, the risk, know what the risk is. So, and you're not fully staffed, let's say. So I'm having to do maybe 5 assessments because I might normally do 3. Absolutely, that's going to affect the clinical outcome, without a doubt.
And I think that's when when Shana and we work together most nights. We're very lucky to be able to do that. But we started going to assessments together just to make sure that we were on the same page. And since we had such an increase in volume of assessments, we wanted to make sure that we were thinking along the same track. So we didn't, when we get put in sticky situations, that we were making the right decision. So we would definitely staff things with each other all of the time because of how busy we were.
And I think that led to better clinical outcomes.
For sure, you get out of your own head.
Mm-hmm. And Allie might see something that I don't see in a room. And when they come into the emergency room, they're not stable. It's a very, you're in crisis clinical assessing at that point.
Both of you coming from that crisis environment where there's high pressure, high turnover kind of environments, do you feel like that's kind of affected how you approach staffing?
Yes, absolutely. We talk about it all of the time, the high pressure that we had in the emergency room and how it's now trickled down into our work now. So if there's a problem that arises in staffing, Shana and I are very much like on it, like right then and there, and we want a solution right then and there when other people don't come from that world. So it's finding that happy medium of how to work with that.
Tell me about that. What's the happy medium?
The happy medium is me personally learning patience. Ask Shana. It's very hard to have an attending, when you're working in the hospital, saying you need to get this person discharged, you need to get this person transferred to a hospital, and you need to do this now. Versus if there is a problem in staffing, we have someone starting on a contract or whatnot, and something falls through. Shana and I are just on it, and we want it to get fixed within the next hour or so, but that's not always the case because that's not how the rest of the world operates. And to be honest with you, that has probably been my biggest struggle for transferring from full-time hospital into full-time staffing.
I see. So coming from that crisis environment, it sort of like makes you think differently about structures and processes. I'm sure there's kind of a belief in healthcare that, well, I think just in general that, you can't make today's short-term like kind of crisis solution into a normal part of the business process or a normal part of the flow. But I think, myself coming from emergency social work, I've seen that happen too, where it's like, you're solving today's crisis, but today's solution to today's crisis becomes like sort of part of your workflow. It becomes part of like, almost the organization's culture and the processes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm about a year out now from when I transitioned over to owning a business. And if you would have ever told me this, because, so in our profession, if you're going to own your own business, most likely it's going to be a clinical practice. And that was never an interest of mine, was being a therapist, having a clinical practice. I have found surprisingly that what I learned in my years as a social worker, especially in healthcare, is a lot of the skill set that I had translated into business. Most of what I do is leadership,
Wow.
listening to my team, valuing what their feedback is. Do take seriously. We just talked about this morning. I have to outweigh their burnout and what we're doing. I value that so much, and I think that's a unique probably mindset that I would kind of assume, that maybe if I just had the business background, I'm not thinking about that as much. So it's the systemic aspect that we work within large systems. I spent those years observing decisions that I didn't necessarily agree with the decisions, and yet I'm the one doing the job. Nobody ever asked me, hey, what do you think? And so I value very much that from my team.
If you're listening to this, you're probably someone who's held the line when no one else would. Someone who believes care still matters even when systems forget. Right now, HR 1, or the One Beautiful Bill Act as it's called, is working its way through the Senate. And if passed, it would gut Medicaid, strip health coverage from millions, and destabilize the already fragile care systems across the country. And even if it doesn't pass in full, the message from this administration is very clear. Medicaid is on the chopping block. Social supports like SNAP and broadband are considered optional. And CMS is not accounting for sequestration and Medicare Advantage rates. This means that every contract, care model, and strategy built on federal stability is already out of date. If you're leading a program that's already on razor thin margins, I built something to help you stay ahead. My HR1 Margin Erosion Toolkit is a strategic weapon for people who lead with both heart and math. It helps you model your projected financial fallout, translate your mission into margin, and walk into your budget meetings with answers. If you lead a care program, a nonprofit, or anything funded by Medicaid, you can't afford to be unprepared for what's ahead. Grab the toolkit now. The link's in the show notes. But if nothing else, call your senator. I posted earlier this week, and some people mentioned the 5 Calls app. I personally just used Google to find the numbers, and that worked fine. But however you do, just make the call, because silence doesn't protect people, but strategy does.
Having that input from the frontline staff. Do you think it's important for like HR and people at that executive level to understand frontline perspectives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's like what my attention with, that's how we're people's lenses. And then all of a sudden they're in an emergency room. They've got a loved one who's potentially doesn't have much time left, and they're in a room with me, and I'm their first introduction, and they're just the relief that you can give them. I always tell them, like, I'm not going to solve everything that's going on here. This is what I'm here to do right now. If I can give you a little bit of guidance, because these systems are hard to navigate. I think that that's where the administration, our systems are missing that piece, what we provide. And so that's what I love about the work that you're doing, is you're putting the value on what we do, because that's what ultimately speaks to the board and to the administrators.
Thank you. That means so much to me. I do a lot of those posts with this hope that I'm smashing that kind of false belief that social work and business don't mix, that they don't work well together, that they're opposing forces.
And I think you are. And I think that honestly, a lot of social workers aren't interested in that. It's not, we can't fully shift all the blame and say, well, they don't listen, or it's like we have to be better at advocating, understanding what speaks to them. And that's what speaks to the business side of we do, whether it's in a big system, in my own business. Like, that was my learning curve, was learning the business aspect. I understood healthcare and loved working with nurses, physicians. I understand how that works. It was the business side of it. They don't offer that a lot in social. When you're getting your master's in social work, it's heavily, I did that at the time I went to University of Kansas. They offered what was called the social work administrative and policy side. So I did that of it. So I learned a ton of policy, and I did learn some of the business aspects of it, but it wasn't a lot.
Well, you also were on the other side of that, right? I think I saw you spent a pretty good amount of time as an adjunct.
Yes, I did. I taught policy very differently than most. I wasn't like you have to know every single piece of legislation because I would lose all of my clinical social workers. If you have your own practice, I have a very good friend that her practice is postpartum, and she's built her 20 some years. She's built her entire practice around that. So I will bring her into my policy class, have her break down what policies that she has to know about that apply to her clinical practice, and also just how she makes owning her own practice.
So in that sense, you were sort of like building this pipeline of, business, at least business ready social workers.
I have the guy I did my practicum under, he was my supervisor. He's all business, and he has actually considers himself a social entrepreneur. He works with a lot of social workers that come with that background and they want to build their own business. So I think there's some of us out there doing it. It's just the majority of social workers clinical is their focus. And if I can shift them a little bit to get, hey, go volunteer for a campaign. If I can get them just a little bit interested, then I feel like I've done my job in the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. Like, so not totally like, going in hard, forcing agendas down anybody's throat, but more of this thing of like, hey, you already have these interests and these skill sets and this kind of direction that you're wanting to go in. And here are, some tangible, immediately actionable tools to help you, along with your journey. So let's pivot a little bit. Do you take that same kind of approach with leadership? Like, do you use things like learning styles in how you approach leadership?
Allie, you want to answer?
Yes. we have a small but mighty team, and she working side by side with her for so many years, and then watching her in this leadership role is really cool because she does adapt to every single person's learning style, and somehow we're all able to work cohesively together because I can't do my job if my coworker isn't doing their part, and vice versa. So she's really good.
That's amazing. Have you seen any success with using adaptability to kind of harness the best out of staff, to sort of develop that talent, to hone in on the strengths and just produce better outcomes in terms of like their career opportunities and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Like with Allie, we'll talk and I'm like, it's there. You just have to get to a place because she has a very unique skill set. She can connect with people, but the most valuable, she has an ability to tell somebody very honestly without being brutally honest.
That's important.
From a business standpoint, like one of the biggest things I've had to learn is I have to collect the money. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, if I do this, we're going to lose the account, right? That's just that devil's, devil on one side and the angel on the other side. And once I got over that hump of the way I could formulate that email, and I learned that skill from Allie. So it's not just me with my staff and that leadership role. I'm learning from them as well. And that's
so powerful.
Staff in their 20s to staff in their 30s. I know also I'm looking at that as well. Like I do have to look at the different generations. I think that one of the biggest mistakes people as they age in leadership, they stay stuck. AI is a great example. I don't know how many people my age, oh my God, AI scares me. And I'm like, well, you better figure it out because it's not going away. So it's that adaptability. And I think that I have to credit a lot of that to the career that I landed in, basically. My first hospital I worked in was a safety net hospital, and I still to this day love that hospital and the people I worked with. Still spend time socially with them because it taught me so much. I worked with a population that taught me a lot. I found, would be very honest with people via substance they had used, and they were using a street term. I'm like, I don't know what that is. You have to tell me. And there's an empowering piece to that. Sounds ironic, but like they felt heard. Like they were teaching me something, and because I'm like, I don't care what you use. I just need you to tell me because I can't help you if you don't. And so if they used a term, I'm like, please tell me what that is. So I think that's another thing that then equates into leadership is I if I can look at anyone on my team, no matter their background, their age, whatever it is, bring value. And if when you're talking about like in large systems, if you have basically closed your doors, you're losing out on a lot of value of what people bring into the job, from housekeeping to your there's so much collective experience and value that is there.
So it sounds like that kind of mix of agility as well as like approachability, I want to say like everybody sort of contributing is kind of like a way of building organizational resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that term. I've never heard that organization. I like it because it's, you have to have that resilience in what we do. Like Allie kind of mentioned it. One of the reasons we started doing a lot of assessments with the team was we were paired with psychiatric nurses that really didn't have the clinical background that we did. So we were often taking, she said, the most difficult situations. So resilience comes from it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're tired. You've already come in and you've maybe done, 7 hours of just nonstop. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're tired, but you have someone who's presenting. It's a very difficult situation. And if you have someone that you trust, it does take a little bit off of you individually. If the two of us could go together and then we could talk about it and then we can present that to the physician who ultimately, makes the decision whether they're going to discharge them or go with what we're recommending. And I think that's the resiliency, is that team. It's what I've always loved, especially about the emergency room, is I used to say that it's like, the nurses, some of them like each other, some of them might not like that nurse, but when there's a trauma, you have to work together. There is no choice, like each other or not. It's a collective coming together around those events.
Trauma bonding, but literally. So again, going back to like that organizational resilience, these days, we have staffing shortages, and especially like across both healthcare, like true health. I don't want to say true healthcare, it's all healthcare, but primary healthcare and then behavioral healthcare as well. Is there any strategies that maybe healthcare executives are kind of not paying attention to right now, or isn't top of mind when it comes to workforce planning?
That value of what social workers do bring is overlooked because they're always looking at, I have to have a nurse because a nurse does A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I bill for that. Same with a physician. And I think that I've seen in my career, hospital systems, they wipe out all the Department of Social Work and they try to do RN case managers.
I've seen that, yeah.
It never works. 3 or 4 years later, they're back to bringing social workers back into the building. So I think the hardest part, that what you then kind of send the message to social workers is, we don't value you. We're going to bring you back. We don't know exactly what you do, but we know it doesn't work without you. But we're in this weird gray area of, I have been asked at midnight to come to a patient's room because they have a puppy in their backpack as a social worker. I'm the only one in the hospital that can handle that. So how do you place value on that? They know that they need you. They know that they're knocking on your door when you're trying to go home, and there's a single mom that needs to be admitted to the hospital and they've got their children with them. And children can't go to the floor with them. And so I think that is where leadership kind of just walks right by us, is the best term I have, because they don't really know what you do. You guys seem like you do a lot, and you seem like you maybe have knowledge and expertise that we don't have, so we don't really know. We don't speak unless we adapt to speaking their language, which is what you're doing.
Right. Communicating those value contributions is an essential skill. It's really, really important, I think, now more than ever, because to your to your story, back to your story, that puppy or those kids, what they look like is, these are things that interfere with patient care. This is what's going to be the difference between a positive outcome and a potentially not so positive outcome, or, impact other things in ways that are often intangible, like, the strain on staff. I think that you've had that experience. I'm sure every single social worker has had that experience where it's like you come in from like a day off and the entire team is like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here because we had all these crazy stuff that we didn't know how to deal with, and they're still here. There's a patient that's in here for 36 hours just waiting for you.
Yes. That's the beauty of what we do is like, for me, it was always first you're like, gosh, and then sometimes like, but this is when you can get really creative. Like, we'd have patients that are on an involuntary hold, and state hospital with COVID, we're still closing down wings at a time. And we'll just kind of let them sit and, okay, well, we're just waiting on that bed. It's like if they've been here for 3 days or 4 days, have they not maybe had their stay? Like, we can look at it differently. Well, the hospital, I can reduce that stay 3 days versus 6 or 7. Here's your outcome right there. That's a tangible outcome. It's a measurable outcome. It's really easy, I think, when you get in those big systems to start thinking like a big system instead of, oh, wait a minute. They've had their medication. We have the history with them, so we know when they medicated, they clear up. It's being able to look at that and having the clinical experience to present that to the medical team that ultimately decides if they're ready to discharge them. And I saw over time, Allie and I developed that relationship of trust. They knew they could trust us to not only make that clinical decision, document it in a way, but had the clinical background that they needed in there for that safe discharge plan.
When you think about sort of the metrics that we look at to value social work, I think social work and staffing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've spent no days in staffing. I don't know what this is like for you, but from what I've heard, it's sort of similar in terms of like tracking those essential kind of metrics that often get lost in the shuffle. So, I mean, obviously you have that reduced turnover, you have positions filled, but what are some other metrics that kind of let you know that your approach is working successfully?
I would say recently, our niche that we have is a lot of the people that we do place want, they're technically working for agency with us, but they want to transition into a full-time employment with the place that we place them at.
That's amazing. That is a huge win, I think, for everybody, because we're in the middle of, that gig economy. You're competing with, these higher salaries for remote temp positions and things like that. So it sounds like you're really striking something important here when it comes to balancing the needs, the holistic needs of that staff, going back to that, with kind of the needs of that organization. There's like an alignment there.
And I think that all comes back to, I have to credit, social work is
Yeah.
listening component to that, and really listening to our clients and listening to our nurses, CNAs, or whatever position that it's for. Because at the end of the day, a lot of them just want to vent and talk, because all of us are having the same frustration. But as a social worker, how can I come in and solve that problem? How do I implement what I did in the emergency room and implement that in staffing? And it's worked.
Tell me about that. When listening and solving the problems, what do you listen for specifically?
I listen to their pain points of, from facility wise, is it a culture thing within the facility? Is it, obviously, is it going to be compensation? What is it like, staff to patient ratio, all of those different things? What are they needing? Or like, how is management sorry, it's what is the upper management, the corporate doing to help their staff? And then, the DONs, the administrators are telling me those pain points, and I take that, I talk to my team about it. And so when they give us a need, then we are able to really break it down for our nurses of this exactly what you're going into. Are you open to something like this? Nurses, they'll walk into any facility. They don't care. But it's just sometimes we just really hit the mark of finding a right fit for the nurse and finding the right fit for the facility, and it all comes together. But all that comes from kind of clinically like assessing the facility and the nurse, I would say.
And it sounds like a layer. Sorry, go ahead.
Internally talk about honesty is the best policy. Let our nurses where they go in. Just the acuity is want to be caught off guard. It's human nature. Or that they know the little things like this is where you're going to park first day, time clock, who you're, can. I mean, one of the expectations of agency is going to get one day, day two, you're on your own. And so you can help them on day one with where you're going to be, where do you park, what's lunch, all of those kind of, they sound like little details. Trying to do is reduce that stress. And so they can go in and focus on their job.
And we want to be able to follow them through if they're doing a contract, follow them through that journey, checking in on them. If they had a really, terrible day, sending them lunch or something like that, just letting them know that we're thinking of them,
Wow.
that we're not just placing you and then goodbye, that you're not just a number to us, we actually do care. And I think that's mixing business and social work together, and that's why it's working for us.
It's beyond just filling in those slots and getting people in.
And that's what I've looked at from my side as making decisions as an owner is a lot that AI can do for takes away kind of the task oriented items for your recruiter. So your recruiters can focus on the relationship. Relationship is between that we call talent, our professionals, the clients. And so there's as part of it too. And I think as workers, we take CEUs for a reason. We're required to have those. Kind of instills in me as an okay, what else is out there? What's new? What's coming? What can we do? How can we the things that produce what we need to produce? I think in a social work background, not foreign to me to always be use reference, as you're reading a study like is out there and demo a lot of tons of apps now. There's tons of companies that just focus on the staffing industry. And so I'll demo anything because sometimes they'll take clients that do exactly what I do and put them on the demo, and then they'll show me like a return on investment. They'll show me those outcomes. Well, I'd rather hear that from somebody else who's doing it, one of their clients that's in the same industry that I am, than just hearing from the business that owns that app because speaking the same language that I am. So I think it's like curiosity maybe that kind of comes the why that social workers, I think that's one of the top things with clinical assessments is kind of always the why. Why are you ready for this now? Why are you having these thoughts now? I think that's been a very transferable skill set that I have brought. I'm afraid to corporate entity that I'm under, I've had those conversations and like we've got a lot of owners that are terrified of AI. I'm just like, why are you terrified? It's not there are aspects, yes. It's just like anything in our world. It can be used for good and it can be used for evil. Like that's just going to be there. But how you learn, it's a tool.
Well, and that kind of goes back to your whole thing about adaptability and staying agile. When you so you've used AI, have you found a sort of sweet spot in terms of like it delivers this ROI as opposed to just like adding layers of complexity?
Mm-hmm. It definitely, the ROI specific do a lot in onboarding process. B test, all of your immunizations, like all those things that go into your onboarding. AI, there's a few specific companies that have created it just for staffing. They can take those tasks off of a recruiter's plate. Even just if post an ad and they're applying for a position using the AI chat, then they can respond within like 3 minutes to an applicant. It's a game changer, especially in healthcare because nurses, CNAs work. So sometimes you're not going to get a hold of them during the day because they work nights. So if you immediately get them once they've applied, it takes us along a lot faster. And in our industry is the faster the better. So
Well, in that initial process, like anyway, it's just sort of like, those checking off boxes and filling in lines and filling in information anyway. So it's not really, I can see that that's the most high impact, at least in that process, because that's definitely something that can be kind of automated and move kind of people further along into, and then you get to, talking to Allie and delving into some of those deeper, more important sort of aspects of placement. And that's can you share any of the companies that you've used?
what is there? I've got to look to my email because I did the demo, and I really appreciated I did that. They were transparent with me. I know, like we would have to implement it across the board with the company because of the IT that it takes to put that in place. Let me see if I can find it for you.
Sure. And then while you're looking up that, can you tell me, or maybe Allie, can you tell me more about how do you make your your community partners feel like it's it's sort of a dynamic kind of relationship as opposed to just being like a funnel?
So a big thing that we implemented is if I, have a new client, one of the things that I have implemented is having team meetings, Zoom meetings of almost everyone on my team. Exactly what we can do for you, when we can do it for you, how we can do it for you. And what that has actually brought to the table is them showing like, hey, this is my team. These are the people that you will communicate with for X, Y, and Z. And so then it just gives them that transparency of knowing exactly who they're going to be facing, who they're going to be working with. Because a lot of it, since it's so virtual, you want to know who you're working with and who you're talking to because we can't be in person. And it's something that I like implementing because I'm not used to being virtual. I'm used to being face to face with someone. And so I think that component is working for us. It's a little bit different from what I've seen done in the past. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. Does having the background that you do, sort of working in these different environments and different healthcare settings, does that shape kind of like how you approach these community partnerships and why you started doing that?
Yes. The second I tell them my background and what I've kind of done and telling them, I've worked in X, Y, and Z setting, then it's like, oh, she gets it. She understands. I understand the lingo. And so that almost, it gives me a leg up because we're not having to navigate so much through this whole salesy pitch. I'm just having a conversation with you. And yes, you are my client at the end of the day, but it also goes back to I want to help you and I want to provide solutions. I'm not there to provide staff. We're actually here to provide solutions to the problems that you're having. And I care. We care, and I've created close relationships with my clients.
It definitely sounds like it works because you deeply understand those pain points on both sides, just both when it comes to the individual staff member along with that organization and sort of just the industry in general.
I did find it's called Converse, Converz, and they have designed their AI as specific to the staffing industry.
Thank you for sharing that. That is
Sure.
great. I just wanted to ask if you found this video insightful. And if you did, please click on subscribe so that we can continue to ensure no one gets left behind in the value-based future of healthcare. So what are some strategies that you use to sort of help healthcare leaders understand sort of the value of the staffing that you do or the value of even just like things like social work or the front lines?
That's a good question. I think I would say somewhat Allie and I especially have had to become more cognizant of that versus it just being what we do. And I'd say that things is it's hard to get in front of people because, they all want to hire, they want to have their own staff internally, understandably. So it's interesting when you look at like what we're providing is the term agency. In social work, that term I think means something different to social workers. When you're providing agency, that's essentially what we are providing to healthcare professionals is the agency to determine when you work and where you work, and that you're not confined to one. It's like I think it's giving them that agency somewhat to show the value, and maybe does increase pay for nurses. And I'm a huge advocate of that because of what they do. So it's interesting coming from having a social work background. Well, now we're on the other side. We have to go get it. And then like kind of saying is like, well, what is different? What's different about you that why should I work with you? And that's a different mindset. And Allie has done an incredible job of meaning that and doing it in a way that it's authentic. I think that's what she was not going to talk about herself enough, so I'll do it for her. We have a client, and the irony is I just happened to be at a football game and a tailgate and kind of interacted, and that's how they ended up becoming a client. But Allie took it from there, and she's so close now with that client that they've shared things going on in their life. And it's like, hey, can I just vent to you for 20 minutes? So the fact that Allie has developed that kind of relationship, I think speaks volumes. I think sometimes we forget that that client is a person and they have a life and they're human and things are going to happen in their life that we may not hear back from them. And I think that Allie has that strength that she felt close enough to her and was like, this person really is not just about my business. This person does care about me. And I think that if you look at where we're at kind of right now in this world, that most people, if you just listen to them for 15 or 20 minutes, can go a very long way. And I think that that's employees try to do it. That's important, especially right now. There's just a lot going on in this world, and sometimes you got to step back and just have a conversation about. It's not about work sometimes, and I think that I like to having those conversations, and it's an investment that I take very seriously.
And having her check in with us, almost daily gives her team the confidence to come to her with ideas and actually have a voice versus sometimes in larger health systems, you don't have that voice. So we really
For
need
sure.
to be creative in the roles that we're in and try something. And if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it was bad. It just didn't work. We just try something else. And she gives us the confidence to do that. She very much backs us in what we want to do, which is huge. You don't find that a lot. There's your compliment for the day.
For the
You
day,
all have been amping each other up this whole hour. I love it. It's a beautiful thing you're building. That's exciting. Where can the audience find you and learn more, and where are you located?
mostly on LinkedIn. I'm located in Kansas City, so I'm at the point I feel like I would love I can help anybody if anybody's interested in taking that step, entering into the business. It's not that scary. It's surprised how translatable our skill set is, and if I can help, I'd love to. I think that,
So much.
and sometimes I didn't always like them, and I didn't understand what they were teaching me until 6 months later, and I'm like,
Tell me one of those hard lessons.
So one of my supervisors, let's just say she was very involved, and sometimes you're just like, gosh, like you're charting your documentation. You missed a period. Like, gosh, I'm in third grade again. But I grew into my career, especially in hospitals. I used to talk to the legal team. Sometimes it felt weekly. So
Gosh.
we're ingraining in us that our documentation mattered so much. Taught me I've taken that everywhere I've gone, and especially being the social worker that came in was there to fill in a gap when the 20 that were there during the day left. It'd be like, your documentation has to tell me where, if you ordered oxygen, better have that in there so I can quickly find it, because I'm on running in this throughout this entire hospital. So I think it was a tough lesson at first, because it felt like too much management. She was instilling in me, like, she taught me how to prioritize. Okay, if you have a transfer out of the ICU, that's your top priority. Because it could be an ICU transfer and you could have a code going in the emergency room at the time. Now, what does a social worker do in a code? I would go between the family. I was was responsible for finding family if their family had not come in yet. You're going between the trauma or the code and the family. I would tell her, like, at night, it's just me. I get a page and I got to go up to ICU, like, at my top priority, because I need to know. He's like, yes. And that would have to go to the chaplain, and they would have to stay with the family or be the go between. So
I see.
I thank her on a regular basis. I continued on after leaving that hospital, understood naturally what were my top priorities and where to put my time. Because you get pulled in 20 different ways at it. And so that's the boundary setting, like, okay, it's not what I need to do right now. This is what I need to do. So less chaotic, manageable.
I would say mine hard lessons came from working in community mental health and being with those individuals who are either on like a outpatient treatment order and they have to receive treatment and whatnot, and having to be at their hearings every single month and having, a caseload of 30 some of them and keeping track of them is having my documentation to be spot on and making sure it was in on time. And a judge that I wouldn't say we're super close, but she kind of guided me and helped me make sure that my documentation was correct, because these people's lives are essentially in my hands, in the sense of making sure I'm documenting what really happened, how it happened, and whatnot. And it being there in person and seeing what could happen to someone's life really taught me how to document, and then transferring that into the hospital, because those same people would come into the emergency room and go through the cycle again of being involuntary.
And they loved having her walk.
I bet I bet they did. Wow, that's so funny that you both talked about just how important that documentation is, the receipts, its continuity, its operational efficiency, its liability, it's a lot of things. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
Well, I think I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. And I think you delivered so many high value insights for our audience. So I hope you come on again soon.
Well, thank you for having us. And anytime, keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, it caught my eye. And I told Allie, I said, you've got to start connect with her, because she's doing some great work. And I think, I hope you continue doing what you're doing. It's much needed.
I appreciate that. I definitely plan to. You as well. As I said, you're building something really strong, something that has a future, and that's so needed. So Kansas is definitely lucky to have you.
Yes, they are. Darren,
Take
help
care.
out.
Sure will.
All right, Christina.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.